Welcome everybody to the beach. Well, not quite the beach. Kind of wish we were at the beach at this point, but my name is Dan Gilbert, the current CISSP president. Welcome to this March CISSP meeting here to everybody. So today's speaker is one of our fantastic members, a gentleman by the name of Kevin Murphy, who's got the coolest Star Trek background you can see. Kevin comes from actually a quite interesting background. So he was the vice president of cybersecurity operations and governance at ioactive.com. He's retired from the U.S. Air Force intelligence officer, and he's got stories that he can't tell. And he's the former director of Windows security architecture at Microsoft. He's been in the industry for over 25 years. And Kevin, we're happy to have you in the group. As per usual, you've been here for a while now, and we're just going to hand it over to you. Thank you again.
Well, thank you. Thank you. This is the presentation, and I had fun putting this one together, and so I think you'll enjoy this as well. But the title is Consumer Privacy is Too Complicated for the Consumers. I think all of us know that, but I've really articulated and spelled this all out as to why we all know that. So quick background, and this is, I love this shot. Facebook, and you got the government big brother, and of course, Google owns the entire room, right? And so my title of this meeting is The Consumer Has No Idea What Personal Information They're Sharing and How They're Being Tracked Online. They have no idea. And I think even our own group, anecdotally, we kind of got this, we know this fairly well, but I had fun putting this together, kind of filling some of the gaps of things I didn't know. So I do work for T-Mobile USA, is the company I work for. And when I say 25, when I retired Air Force intelligence officer, all of that is with the U.S. National Security Agency. So that's they hire military people, and that's how it's all staffed. And so I spent my career with the National Security Agency.
Actually, super interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting
these guys
time.
are like way more high level than I am. Like they're like.
What was that?
No, go ahead, Kevin. We
Okay.
just had background noise.
All right. So background. Let's talk about privacy laws versus the digital age and what's known about you. And then we get into the good stuff about what you can do. Okay, and so this will be an interactive discussion. So there's no one shy in this group. And if you don't ask questions, I have been known to call on people, especially students. So this will be an interactive discussion. Okay, so the purpose of this presentation is to show you, inform you about what's being tracked on you so you can do what's best for you and your family. That's the whole purpose, is just to give you information. Okay, and I think you've heard these bullets before. If a product you're downloading is free, then you are the product, and specifically your information is the product. Your data is the product, so they can sell you stuff. And we do an awful lot of convenience by giving up our privacy. And so what about you is so interesting, and why should you even care? A lot of people, my own kids say, Dad, what do I care? What do I care that my privacy is compromised? Who cares? Well, we're going to get into that. Okay, your web browsing history is interesting. Your social media profile, your contacts on your phone and in your on your laptop, who you follow, what you click on, how long you linger over a post, and who you forward it to, and your comments. Your photos, your microphone, your location history, and your phone contacts. All that is interesting to a digital media company. Okay, still, why do I care? Have you ever wondered why a lot of these websites that you visit, they always want you to download and install their app versus their website? And they tell you that, boy, if you had the app on your phone, it would load faster, it'd be so much easier. So why do you think, this is the first question, so why do you think that all these apps these websites we visit want us to download their app? Why do we think?
They want us to have better experiences.
Yeah, that's right.
And they probably also have more access to information, depending on what the app's permissions are.
Yeah, I don't believe the restrictions that the cell phone providers tell us are placed on these apps. I believe that the apps are finding ways to get around them. I've gotten to where I won't let an advertisement play on the TV in my home at all because of a little add-on for many apps called Silver Push. I'm not going to go into it, but look it up.
So this is interesting because if you have an app on your phone, that app is not in a container. It is on your phone and it is listening and spying on everything else you do on that phone, whether that app is activated or not. If it's on your phone, it can track every other activity that you do on the phone. So the last time I gave this presentation, further down into it, I said, Alexa, and I had at least 4 answers on the conference call. I think that's interesting. So the app can get more information of your activity on your phone than if you visit a website, you got a gateway called a browser. If the app is on your phone, it can spy on everything else you do on that phone, whether your app is active or not. And I think the average consumer doesn't understand that. Okay, let's talk about laws, privacy laws that are protecting. So here's another question. When were most of the federal Canadian privacy laws enacted? How old are they? Oh, that's scary. No one knows, or everyone's just shy?
I have an excuse.
Okay.
These I think, if
I'm a Yank.
yeah, Kevin, if I'm correct, they're probably, I mean, the consumer's privacy laws are dating back most of the 70s.
Yeah.
And then some of them were updated. Some of them I think got updated in the 90s, but I don't think there's been too much work on them since.
All right, Stan, you win the prize for Bitcoin.
No, can I have something more tangible, please?
2006.
Okay, there's your Privacy Act of 1983 by Canadian. And also BC has updated theirs in 2003. And then in 2015, you got the PETA. But if you read PETA, it defers to the province's privacy. So most of PETA is referencing what the provinces are doing. And so even though it's 2015, it's referencing what BC did in 2003. Okay, and the reason why that's interesting, I'm kind of alluding to it here, is what was the state of technology in the era these privacy laws were created? Okay, most of your public records were on paper. You remember the phone books?
We still had landlines.
Yes, we still had landlines.
Phone booth, basic cell phones, internet was mainly dial-up, and mail was mainly a postage stamp. Email showed up about in the early 90s. Windows 95, and you had these 486 processors with 5 megs of disk space. And what we got on our phones now? Are we up to 32 gigs on our phone? So
standard is 64
Mine's
now.
got 256
Yeah.
and it's kind of a weak model.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the state of technology when these privacy laws are protecting the consumer. And does anybody else think that these privacy laws are still adequately protecting our consumers? Yeah, I thought that'd be quiet. Okay, I love this picture. This is all in your cell phone now, every one of these things. And that's pretty dramatic. It's all in your pocket. Okay, and today, 24/7 everything. In fact, if you know that when you get a Slack message at 10 o'clock at night and it's an interrupt note, you're probably going to look at it. So instead of working 9 to 5, we're really on call all the time. Everything is instant, from email to, and I love this, what I've got in highlights. You're arguing politics with people on social media you don't even know. How useful is that? And even in person, have you ever successfully changed anyone's political opinion about anything? Yet online with people you don't know, you actually engage, thinking you're going to change someone's opinion. That's who we are as a species, right? E-commerce. Remember we used to talk about Cyber Monday? Well, not anymore. You can order anything you want at any time of day or night with e-commerce. And so your online accounts, your banking, your health sports, youth sports, everything is online now. And then here's my first caution is how many consumers have the same account name and password for their banking as their social media? That's kind of scary, but you know the average consumer is doing that. So that's why a lot of the important accounts are moving to second factor authentication, 2FA, because they're trying to protect the consumer from themselves. And I love this picture here. Everything these people are doing right here is being tracked online. Okay, so this is the state of the art where we're today. We went from privacy laws that were written back the last century, mostly, and to the internet. The technology was pretty much limited to instant everything, instant connection. Okay, so why should you care? Okay, so privacy protects you from criminals, keeps you safe from being defrauded of your money, your property, and your reputation. People can pretend to be you digitally, and they can open credit in your name. And also personal grudges. People can track you down. That's just not a good thing. An ex-spouse or whatever, someone that doesn't like you can track you down. In the phone book in the era back in the last century, you had to have the phone book for the city that person lived in. And if you don't live in that city, you really had no access to that phone book, which generally had your address in it. So now this is all online. If you have not Googled yourself, you should do so, and you would be amazed all the information that comes up, all the public record information, all the information that you have voluntarily given to social media and Google. It's going to show up. And back in the era when those privacy laws were written, that wasn't possible. Someone would have to investigate you. They would have to go to the province, they have to go to the city, they have to go to the federal and request all these things, and it shows up in a paper copy. Nowadays, it's just a quick search. So if you haven't Googled your name, I really highly encourage you to do so. And the thing about personal privacy is that you can't decide later. If your information is out there, it's out there and it's not going to come back. So you want to decide sooner than later, how much private information do you want to have exposed out into the public internet? And so I've also referenced, this is something that's The Social Dilemma. This is something that was on Netflix, and it was really, really well done. Talked about people in Google and Netflix of how they do the algorithms to track your behavior and how it's tailored down. And with tracking your behavior, it becomes very predictive about what type of products that you're probably interested based on your online behavior, from your clicks to your linger to your forwards to your social media posts.
Kevin, real quick, just with that movie, that A should be required for every student, period. But to give some context there, it's actually made by the people who built the algorithms. So it's coming straight from the horse's mouth. It's a phenomenal show.
Yeah, I would say if you're a student or you're doing your career, this is really good because you want to watch this because this is something that the average consumer just has no idea. So I took another run at this. What's known about you? We drive in front of cars. They have all these bumper stickers. And this was from a city in Eastern Washington talked about, it put this out about, be careful of the information you're giving out. And just by little stickers, you got, it spells it out. Hunting. Well, that means the house is probably vacant in November during elk season, right? And yeah, you've got all kinds of information you're giving up here. And a license plate that is one of the vanity license plate, very easy to remember. So, but this is a physical representation of what I'm trying to show. Your risk here is limited to the person that drives behind you. On the internet, we essentially give the same information, but it's worldwide. So that's a physical representation trying to convince you about your own privacy. Okay, so I said this several times, go back in the 90s, most stuff is on separate file cabinets. And today it's way easier to gain a complete profile just doing a Google search. And if you haven't searched your own name, you need to do so. Because when you do that, you're going to find all this information showing up. And one thing I want to point out, face recognition is now on your phones. They're scanning your photos. You have security cameras. A company called Clearview that I think the Toronto Police Department was using till the public outcry happened. And you can change your password, but you can't really change your face. You're stuck with that. So it becomes a password that you cannot change. How many of us have actually given our DNA to the 23andMe, and the other one is Ancestry.com? How many? I know I did it, and now I wished I had not, because now that's a public record that can be subpoenaed. So probably not a good idea. Although I did it for the research capability. And I did it. I found out that I'm extremely Irish, which is probably what I already knew. I didn't know that I was 4% Neanderthal. And the only superpowers that gives me is I probably don't sneeze when I eat dark chocolate. So that's the best they came up with about my 4% Neanderthal. So in other words, it wasn't valuable information for me anyway. Here's something else I want people to realize, is that your Internet of Things, your devices, so if you buy a new refrigerator, it's tracking your hourly usage. You have a smart power meter on your phone that's also tracking your hourly usage. So the power company and your fridge manufacturer is going to know when you're home and when you're not. And I think that's interesting, because if, again, that's all subpoenable information. If you say, well, I didn't commit the crime, I was home. They subpoena your power records and your no power spike indicate that you're home, you're probably not telling the truth. So the Internet of Things, which are everywhere, is tracking your behavior as well. Your phone in your back pocket, there are 5 radios in your phone in your back pocket. And so they can track you down within 2 meters on an X, Y, and Z axis, 2 meters, because you have 5 radios in that phone in your back pocket. Any questions on this?
I had a comment.
I'll say I bought a new TV recently, and I would say that the vast majority of time I spent researching different models of TV was to find one that would function as a screen without being connected to the network at all. And I finally did find one, but it's getting harder. So if you're going to be due for a new TV soon, get it now while you still can, because pretty much every single TV is going to have to be online, or it'll refuse to function. And then once they start putting 5G chips in TVs, it's game over.
There was another comment out there as well.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick comment. I don't have a TV, haven't had one for 10 years. It does not impact your life. Just get rid of the bloody TV. Sorry. That was just a personal opinion. What I wanted to bring to the table was, in terms of privacy laws, there's a couple other things that are missing. The first is consumer education, which is kind of what you're implying in certain ways. And the second thing is enforcement. There's no point in having speed limits if there's absolutely no one to check on the speed limits at all, and that the police rely on people phoning in, checking on speed limits and things like that. So I just kind of bring that to the table as well, that it is not sufficient enough for politicians to bring a law, wrap their hands off and walk away from it. There are other elements to this that are completely missing from any other situation that you would find when you're applying these things to other industries or other regulatory bodies or things like that. There doesn't appear to be those pieces of the puzzle in place for privacy laws. That's just what I wanted to comment on. Thanks.
Yeah, you're spot on. I agree. If there's no enforcement, then the law is just window dressing. It's just check the box security.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Okay, let's talk about today's digital marketing. And I just want you just a quick scan about what they're doing for digital marketing. You go all the way around, you see all the inputs that are coming down. And these algorithms are written to build a digital online profile for you to be predictive about what kind of services and goods you might be interested in. So that sounds benign. Okay, it's fine. I may actually be interested in some of this, but it can also be used for illicit purposes as well, because it can use to determine and manipulate consumer preferences. And this is the part where it gets a bit scary, because this same algorithms that a marketing company is using to manipulate your behavior to potentially buy a product that you weren't aware of or didn't know you need, Governments can do this also. And that's where the manipulation part gets a bit scary, is that the sell me a good is one point, but there's nothing stopping from governments using this information to manipulate consumer preference or consumer behavior. You've all heard of the Chinese social credit score is an example of what that manipulation could be like. And so there's a dark side to this that is not regulated because, again, our laws were written in the last century. And this is where it starts getting a bit of a concern. Okay, online tracking, you're scanning your user data in the cloud. If you know when you get an iPhone or an Android, they give you a certain amount of free cloud usage. That's because when your data's in the cloud, it certainly is convenient for you because it shows up on all devices, but they're also scanning your data. They're doing big data analytics, using AI, face identity recognition. They're scanning your photos, looking for your faces. The metadata on a picture you take on your cell phone puts you at a certain location with a date timestamp on it. And now you've got a face recognized. So you are there, and you're also there in anyone else's photo that you happen to be in. Your voice identity recognition, hard to change your voice print. So news feeds based on your previous online activity. And I think this is not new to us. In fact, I've noticed that during you pick whatever election, that the opposition viewpoint starts to filter out of my news feed. So all I'm getting is news feeds based on my previous clicks, and it filters out the opposition. So if the opposition would have a better idea, I'm not getting that information because it's already filtered out. So we're not getting balanced news anymore, all based on our previous online activity. And here comes the marketing algorithms, and this is where it can be abused with the Chinese social credit score. Okay, so say you pick up a copy of the Globe and Mail and you read it on a Sunday morning. Who knows what I read in that newspaper? In a paper copy of the newspaper,
No one.
no one. Therefore, the Globe and Mail has to, because they don't know their audience, they have to attract a broad audience. They don't know your political persuasion. They don't know which party you're affiliated with. So they have to report all of it. So in a paper copy, you're going to get balanced news because they don't know your preference. There's no algorithms. We'll take the same copy and go online. Now this world changes quite a bit when you go online. They know what you read, when you read it, how long you read it, who you forwarded to, any clicks you did while you were there, and where you went after that. And this is interesting because if you keep this website up and you keep browsing on another tab, this website is still tracking your online behavior. And I don't think the consumers realize that. You have to close out of the browser for that to occur. And they also, if you have an account, they know because the account requires your phone number. They know your phone ID, your phone number, your location, and how often you visit the site because you're visiting the site. And if you have the Globe and Mail app on your phone, it's doing everything else that everybody else is doing. Okay, but your data is protected by these online privacy policies. And these are the policies that when you download an app or you buy a new phone or you sign up for Rogers or TELUS, they give you these user agreements. And they're about 21 pages long that we've all read before we agreed because we're standing in a place that we have time to sit down and read 21 pages worth of privacy policies. Do you think any consumer is reading these privacy policies? Okay, I don't think so. Well, you have policies from the phone manufacturer, all your apps, the search engine you're using, any of the browsers that you might use in the cell carrier or internet provider, and the cloud service provider. And any website you're visiting also has a privacy policy. So have you read all those privacy policies that places you're visiting? So just one transaction, you got all these policies that are covering your privacy. Okay, this is the fun part because to build this presentation, I actually read them all. And I found some very interesting things. Kind of an overall, I found out all the stuff that you actually care about shows up around page 15 to 18 and goes all the way to the end. So the first part is all legalese to bore you to death because they know you're not getting to page 15 to 18. And that tells you that they're going to be spying on you. Here's some of the stuff I pulled out of the Microsoft one. And this includes all Microsoft products. We obtain data from you from third parties. What the heck does that mean? We may process your image or voice data. Okay, well, that's interesting. And this is interesting, like Microsoft Photos, because this is up in OneDrive. I got this message. They're going to scan my photos. Do you have appropriate consent from all the people in your photos and videos? Really? Who the heck's done that? So this is how they get themselves out of that privacy statement. Because they're going to scan your friends' photos and looking for face recognition. And if you click decline, you're denied from using the product. Because your privacy laws are written back to the last century, and this concept wasn't even thought of back then. So they can say whatever they want. If you don't like this, don't use the product. Okay, this is interesting. I log in here with I logged in with my browser, my Edge browser. Did you know that if I open, and this is a Microsoft product, the Edge browser is a Microsoft product, so is Bing. And if I have Outlook, like O365 opened, but even though it shows you I'm logged in here, if I close this out, but if I leave any other Microsoft product open on my desktop, I'm not logged out. So let me say that again, because they all do this. If I were to close this out, I am still logged in. What I have to do is actually click on my name and physically have it brought down to log out. If not, I am still logged in and it is tracking my behavior on my laptop. If I keep any of the Microsoft products open, I am still logged in. Okay, and then when I sign out, like I click that and signed out, I get this message. Removing this account. I'm not removing the account. All I'm doing is signing out. But the average consumer will see this message and say, oh my God, I don't know what this means, but I don't want to do it. And they stay logged in and their behavior is tracked. It says they're going to do this right in the end user license agreement. It tells you this right about page 15 to 18. So this is misleading. It's telling you removing this account and you're not, you're just signing out. Okay, never do this. Keep me signed in. If you do, they're tracking everything you do. Just not a good idea. Okay, let's go over to Google. And here's a listing of some of the major Google products over here. I don't think a lot of people know they own YouTube. Okay, and then Google's privacy policy. So I just pulled out some key phrases from. We collect content you create, upload, and receive from others when using our services. This includes emails you write, receive, photos, videos you save, docs, spreadsheet you create, and comments you make on YouTube video. They're collecting all this and they're correlating it. And here's some more. Voice audio information that when you use any of our audio features. So if you have an Android phone, voice and data information is very more intrusive than it is you have an Apple phone. Purchase activity, your location data, people with whom you communicate or share content. Activity on third-party sites and apps that use our services. So let's unpack that. Activity on third-party sites and apps that use our services. So in other words, it meant you have all your Google stuff closed out, but if you go to a website that has a Google cookie on it, they're still tracking your behavior because this third-party site has a Google cookie on it and now it's tracking you, even though you think you've logged out. Information about things on devices near you, such as Wi-Fi access points, cell towers, and Bluetooth. Okay, here's where it gets interesting for the consumer. When you're thinking Google, you're not thinking Wi-Fi access, cell towers, or Bluetooth. That sounds like infrastructure. Yet, that's what they're tracking. Because any of these Google apps that you have on your phone is tracking this information about you. Let me pause and ask, do you think the average consumer realizes this?
I think the average consumer doesn't care.
Yeah.
I was
And I
just
don't
about
think-
to say that.
And I don't think I've made a
Yeah.
compelling argument yet that they should care. But I think you're right. I get that from my own kids, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about prior to the whole thing, Kevin, right? Like they just don't care.
Right. Google also collects information from publicly accessible sources. If you appear in a newspaper article, Google search engine may index that article and display it to other people in your name. Well, that's the example they give. They're very benign. What they're also saying is, if your divorce decree, your purchase or sale of a house, any other public record information, any traffic ticket you get, which is all public information, that's all correlated as well. Okay, and then Google's file on you is here. His area is 10 times bigger than Facebook's, because Google's cookies are everywhere. Okay, and then I love this with Google. Sync and personalize your Chrome experience across all your devices. That's great for them because it makes it easier for them to correlate all your online activity from whatever laptop or phones you're using. So don't ever sync this, because that's you're giving them access to your complete online behavior. Okay, I love this little thing here. I thought that was fun. Gotta have a little humor.
It's good.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
Yeah. Okay. Keeping going. Now, this is something interesting. So go up to your Google account. You click on your name here, and manage your data and personalization. You can do this on your Google account, or if you have an Android phone, this is all done for you at your convenience. And you click on My Activity, My Timeline, and location history is on. Okay. And it wants please add your home and work address. Don't do that. Oh my God. Really? This is what you get. So there's the travel history. And if you clicked on it, it'll give you a date, time of when you were at each of these places. Is every consumer okay with all this?
Well, I just want to say one thing though. I did try to turn all that stuff off some years ago, and nothing works. The maps don't work. Like it's just like the convenience it makes everything very difficult. So
Yeah.
maybe something to consider.
You know, and that's the point, because the consumer privacy laws don't protect you. And they say in your user agreement, if you don't like any of this, click decline and you'll be not denied from using the service. So exactly right. You're going to be denied from actually using the service if you click, no, I don't want this tracked. Okay, so this is 2018. Do you remember when there was a GRU agent that went to London and tried to poison a Russian dissident by putting a nerve agent on his doorknob? You guys remember that in 2008?
Yeah, they were successful, I believe.
It got him. It didn't kill him, but him and his daughter both were infected. Okay, this is an interesting story, is that he tracked his telephone movements within Moscow, established his daily routine about going trips from his place of residence to the GRU operation. This is all from the phone data that he's got in his back pocket. Remember I said there was 5 radios, okay? The telephone metadata that validated his real name is Denis Sergeyev, and his cover name is Sergei Fedorov. This extra proof came in the form of a stray call from a telephone number registered to Denis Sergeyev's wife to the number registered to Sergei Fedorov. In other words, his wife called him on his work phone and asked him to bring home bread or something. Therefore, now you correlated, you broke his cover name, you know who he is, now he's got his operation. Okay, here's his route he took from Heathrow to the doorknob and back. He took the tube and then he took an Uber. All tracked by telephones. And so we know who it was because he had his phone in his back pocket, his information being tracked. And this is my comment about the consumer. You know, if the spies can't figure this out, then I know it's too complicated for the average consumer. Because a Russian spy should have known better, had his phone in the back pocket, and we tracked him all the way to the site of the crime. So we know with certainty he was the one that did it. So
Kevin, Just a bit of an interesting one there. If you go back to the map, I don't know how many people saw this. Some guy in Germany just created traffic jams in a city because he loaded up a whole bunch of Android phones into a pull cart. Like he had like probably 50 or 60 plus of them, had them all on and walked them around the city. And on Google Maps, it created a complete traffic jam and rerouted people.
Yep. Because you had enough phone, because that's how it works. It tracks your phones and the speed and direction of the metadata from all the phones, and that's how Google Maps or Apple Maps works. That's how it works. And so he totally gamed the system. So if you're going to storm the U.S. Capitol, you probably want to leave your cell phone at home, because all this, you got them within 2 meters. Yeah, be smarter than the Russian spy. And this is what I don't think most consumers realize, that all this information is subpoenable. And there you go. Okay, questions about what we've talked about so far till I go into phase 2 here?
I had one question regarding the cloud.
Okay.
I was never sure if my stuff I put in my cloud, like the OneDrive for business, is scanned. So you're confirming that, yeah, they do?
Well, for business, that's a different end user licensing agreement. You have to look and see what they do. For the consumer, yes, but you'll want to read what they do for the businesses. I couldn't imagine that they're scanning it for the business, because otherwise, why would you use it? But now you got me there, because I have not read the Google Drive for Business. I have not read that end user agreement.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was any pushback if it was, but okay, thanks.
Yeah, I haven't read them, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they're all over the world too. So if you're scanning everyone's documents that are business related, that seems problematic to me. But I don't know. I haven't read the agreement.
It seems like there's a market for something here, some kind of shadow phone, where you can partition your phone, and someone develops something that floods these buckets with false information and obfuscates the end result, something like that. And the other point is that as we develop these technologies, I've noticed just from our discussion that it seems that all eggs are in one basket as far as these data collection agencies are concerned, insofar as, let's hope one day the mobile phone goes away. Is it you drop your mobile phone? The spy himself, I mean, it seems like this entire thing would collapse if he just didn't carry his phone with him. And that seems to be, from looking at it from a data collection perspective, to be kind of a little bit of a weakness in the system, that everything is going through a single channel, which effectively can be defeated by simply throwing your phone away. I'm not sure how this consolidates in the future, but clearly the phone seems to be the main access point for a lot of things.
Let me build on what you just said, because when I gave this presentation internally to my company, I asked the question, which would be worse for you, losing your phone or losing your car?
I can guess the answers.
Yep. Hands down the car. Oh, sorry, hands down the phone. Far worse than the car.
It was 100%. I found one person this week that said car first. He drove a Porsche. I said, okay. But prior to this week, it was 100%. I'd rather lose my car than my phone. I can always go rent a car, but losing my phone, that's my life.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said is that if you just leave the phone at home, but would we ever do any of that?
Yeah, I'm more thinking of 10, 15 years time. I suppose the new emerging technologies will have this stuff built in, and this point is probably moot at that point. But yeah, the same people who would not get rid of their phone are the same people who would say, I don't care, if you told them all of this stuff. At least that's been my experience. I've always put it down to generational stuff. I don't know, I'm 56 years old. So my approach to this is there's absolutely nothing extraneous on my phone. However, I'm well aware that I'm continually tracked with it. for myself, I would love to have an alternative to my phone, but I'm finding it needed. I'm an IT manager. I need my phone. So we run out of choices, and I find that the data collection agencies are almost cheered on by all these other people who just do not care. And
That's
so
right.
I become a smaller and smaller minority, and action coming from that is less and less relevant because the majority speaks for all of us at some point.
Well, and here's an example. I'm in the middle of delivering a presentation. I got 2 text messages where I'm delivering the presentation, and I glanced over at it, and I'm presenting, and I glanced over at my cell phone. I think 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
It definitely becomes a source of convenience to a large degree. And, you know, Ray, you had an interesting point about it being generational. I think if you would have brought that point up 5 or 6 years ago, I would have agreed with you. I think in the last 5 or so years, especially with the pandemic, it's less generational now.
Yeah.
Like
agreed.
it's very much moved to the point of it's now an overall convenience. I mean, I know close friends that I would actually probably almost consider family, within the age range of 70 to 80 that would be completely lost if they lost their phone.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't know how to function anymore. And that largely was an impact of the pandemic and having to be as isolated as they were.
You know, I interviewed a journalist for a little slightly different presentation, and he said in his career, he's just retired after 40 years. He says in his career that the attention span has gone to under 30 seconds.
Yep.
And he says sound bites and headlines. And there's a stat I'm going to show you in a minute that says 6 out of 10 of us will forward an article on our phones solely based on the title without ever have read the article. So that's how we can be manipulated, because what if the title is catch bait and the actual article is something different? We wouldn't have known. And so that's how we can be manipulated.
Kevin, is this a good time to take the usual break?
Let's do so.
Now?
And then I'll go into Facebook and
Yeah.
what they've done. And you think you're safe from Facebook because you don't use Facebook, but you know, Facebook is more than just Facebook. There's a bunch of other stuff here. But let's go ahead and take how long,
Sure.
Stan? How long you want to take a break for?
Let's take if we take a break for 15 minutes, does it give you enough time to finish?
Yep.
Sounds
I've only
good.
got a few slides left. I got 10, 12 slides left.
Perfect. Okay, so everyone will break until 3:15, and then we'll come back and finish off the presentation. Chat is open. Feel free to unmute yourself. If you've done your hair or you don't have any hair like me, feel free to turn your camera on. And yeah, go ahead. And if you need to grab a drink, take a break. Now's a good time to do it.
And thank you for telling me to comb my hair. I actually found a comb in my drawer not too long ago.
Mine's been gone for years, so I'll just blame my daughters. Okay,
All right.
see everybody back in 15 minutes.
I'm just glad I can attend these things. I don't normally get to, so it's always good to see.
Where are you based out of, Sean?
Well, I'm in Vancouver. It's just I'm busy. I'm always working.
Yeah.
I'm worried that these web meetings will actually go away because it's such a convenient thing to do rather than going downtown. Even though I love seeing people down face to face, right?
We won't be getting rid of the website of it. We'll likely go to a hybrid model on that. There's been certain things that have been really convenient that we never actually would have bridged had the pandemic not happened. So there are certain positives that come out. Like, I mean, we like people like David, for example, would never have connected. Like they wouldn't be part of the meeting. You know, Jerry's group, Jerry's IC Squared group out of San Diego. You know, that's another connection that while it's there, the in-person meetings it's impossible to get people out, right? And I think you know, as we move forward with it, there'll definitely always be a component of it. And you know, Lloyd, who helps coordinate, does a lot of coordinating for the speakers. Hey man, like it opened up a whole new world for being able to get speakers in, right? Because you're not having to figure out, where are, the local speakers coming for, but can I get somebody that's going to be willing to drive for a couple hours
Yeah,
to come and
absolutely.
do a presentation? This is just, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And and I'm in New Westminster, and I have a call from 1 to 2
Yeah.
every Friday. So
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
no way that I could get to downtown.
Yeah.
Well, and expect me to drive from Whistler at $2 a liter? No.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't drop like they predicted today, eh?
I think this is, the oil companies, there's no motivation for them to drop it as long as they
No.
think we'll pay for it.
Yeah.
Although I will say, I noticed all the Teslas on the road now.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a really funny thing. So my wife's family's out of Calgary, and her brother was making some comment about, Teslas and electric cars and different things like this. And my wife was like, well, they're everywhere. And he's like, what do you mean they're everywhere? I'm just like, she's like, there's everywhere. Like I live in Chilliwack, and there's three Model 3s on our street. Like the Model 3 is like the new Camry. Like literally, like they're absolutely everywhere. And it's interesting being in BC on the West Coast here. That's not like that everywhere. They're still pretty novel in a lot of places, even in Canada. And it's like the shift here on the West Coast has been probably a lot bigger than it has been in other places.
I think $2.19 a liter is going to encourage me to buy an electric car.
I'm now wishing, because we were looking a couple of years ago, and now it's time to buy was like they said on the news report after the last Winter Olympics in Whistler. They said, when was the time to buy? And they said yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of those things. Okay, well, I'll let you folks keep continuing. I'm just going to step away for a few minutes.
Yeah. I had a question about speakers. I don't know what speakers are coming up. There's some very interesting ones that I was really hoping to see again. One was a lawyer, and it was been a few years, but his insights were actually really interesting. And then I know there was a university professor from UBC that was doing different talks, perhaps having the students present on some of the hacks they've done, which that'd be a lot of fun to watch. But I wasn't able to catch those ones, so I've been sort of.
Oh, that's Constantine at the UBC. He has a cybersecurity PhD program. Yeah, they defend their papers once a year, usually in October. And if you haven't attended one of those are fascinating.
Fun, yeah.
These kids, they've really done their homework. I think they're fascinating, and plus it's a good place to go recruit some good thought.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, but I keep missing those ones. I don't know why. I see it pop up, and I'm like, oh, I got to make that one, but I just can't. So hopefully, we can somehow. These are not recorded, I believe, right? So
No.
Constant.
When I popped into this one,
Try to
really
look him up.
it said it was being recorded.
Yeah, they're recording this one.
Okay.
So now I go into Facebook next, and you can see what's up on the screen now. Look at some of the details that they collect. And when I read that, in my feeble mind, I think, why does Facebook care about my battery level? And so then I realized they don't. They're just scraping everything they can from the phone, and then they'll sort it out later.
Yeah. Yeah, if they can, draw a correlation that they didn't anticipate,
Yeah.
It'll pop up later since they have everything.
Well, I know what windows in the foreground, what in the background, any mass movements. Holy smokes. They're scraping everything. And you're right. I mean, they don't know what they're going to correlate, so they just capture it all.
I often wonder if, I should pollute things more. You see those different Facebook surveys that people always filling out. I just try to pollute it as much as I can myself.
That's some of the research I do. I kind of give them things to look for. And I'm going to show an example here before is that, and I don't, one, like my daughter, I've had a cell phone, I've had Apple, not Android, for gosh, since we started when my kids were small. And I called my this one daughter, since she was a little kid when I first got the phone. Her name is Erin Murphy, and I call her Erin Von B. It's an endearing term. I've called her that since she was 3 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, and so now as an adult, I only call her that on Instagram, not Instagram, text messaging, because she's an adult. I'm not gonna, so just on text messaging, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And when I did face recognition, it identified her name as Erin Von B. So that's not in email, that's only in text messaging. So that tells me that they're tracking, they're listening to my text messaging as well.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I ended up using Google for something. Usually I use DuckDuckGo, and then I was looking for a pair of boots, you know. Then I went back to Facebook, and I noticed the ads coming through are all boots, you know.
And I'm gonna make it even worse. I was talking to one of my friends about what restaurant to go to, and he has a Gmail account. And I suggested one restaurant. And he says, "Well, I'll have to take out a mortgage to go to that place for dinner." He says the very next day, all these mortgage companies showing up, just because he used the word mortgage in a Gmail message.
It gets worse than that, Kevin. You can try things like just talking about it around your device and see what type of ads come up.
Yeah, nice.
Well, and you know, just that, like I said, and when I gave this internally, I yelled out Alexa, and I had 4 responses on the call from people on the other end of the conference call.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, think if you have a business call and you got Alexa running in the background.
I'll listen to
So-
everything you say.
I have a question here. Just in terms of how people are dealing with this, I'm a little surprised that more people don't block adverts. I haven't seen an advert for a long time, and most of the people that I deal with that do not like their privacy invaded are of the same ilk. They block out all the adverts and things like that. So regardless of what they're tracking, they don't see the adverts. Do you generally feel that that is actually a, you know, really there's not much else you could do about it, but do you feel that that is an item that is actionable in a positive way? I mean, does it really help us to, as a fight back, to block adverts? Is there anything else we can do? I mean, we can go through our mobile phones and we can turn off location and we can turn off all of these things. But outside of that, when we come to the conclusion of a conversation like this, is there any mechanisms that could be put in place to allow us to push back against this kind of stuff? It seems like we're all doing stuff on our own to try and push back, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of groundswell of something that we could actually use to change the situation outside of our own ineffectual checking checkboxes and things like that.
Oh,
Well,
and
it's
the
not just
checkboxes.
checking checkboxes. There are ad blockers for browsers that really are effective. uBlock Origin by Raymond Hill, Hill on GitHub.
Yes,
Actually works,
Yeah.
and it works to the extent that sites object to it. And some sites will put up a blocking box in front of their content saying, you have an ad blocker on, you
Yeah.
don't turn it off, you can't see our content. At which point I close that tab and go find it somewhere else, because you know none of that stuff is so unique.
Oh yeah, I just turn off JavaScript and then go for it.
And as for TV, if there are maybe 3 broadcasts a year that we watch as they're sent. So there's not much choice about getting the ad, at least receiving the ads. You can mute them. That's about it. But everything else I watch is pre-recorded, and then the ads are edited out.
I'd like to add a point. So for those of you who may or may not know, I actually operate in kind of a different realm than most others. I work with high profile people, whether it be celebrities, athletes, billionaires, centimillionaires, working on their ships and their boats and their planes and with their families directly. And I would suggest that when I speak to a lot of these individuals, whether I'm in their homes or wherever they might be, whether it be Dubai or Switzerland or wherever, it really depends on the focus on privacy is very different from when I'm talking to people, say, for example, if I'm giving a presentation at a public event or whether I'm speaking to these individuals in person. I think the key thing is one of the things that they care about are what do they have to lose? 3 top tenets for some of the clients I work with are family, privacy, and reputation. And depending on the value of those particular 3 tenets, do they decide to invest in their energies or their efforts to keep themselves private? And of course, you've talked about a lot of these very interesting things that Facebook and Google and all these other platforms are collecting. And of course, we share that with our clients and we talk about back channel communication, integral communication. We talk about traveling, because then you think about travel, privacy and security is quite different than when you're at home behind your gated community and your bulletproof vehicles. But then when you travel to somewhere else, wherever that might be, whether it be a resort or a beach or something to that nature, travel is quite different. And I guess where I'm going with this is that the reason why most people don't care about privacy, because from what my thing is they don't value it. They don't see the value proposition there. They see an obstacle and they don't see how that really impacts them. But when the threshold has passed, so for example, if I'm dealing with, say, a very high profile individual that approached me and said, look, I'm taking on this extremely high profile role. The people on my board are going to be opposition of what I'm going to bring on. I want to make sure my family and my privacy are protected. They have a different value proposition, and then they start following those. And not everyone within the family will follow them. But again, going back to what we're kind of discussing, I think the key thing is the reasons for employing some of these privacy and security and these methodologies, and or actually even doing a deep dive into what we are and what we aren't doing, what we are allowed, what our family governance structure looks like, what are the net results, what are the things that we say thou shalt do this or you will be ostracized from the family, with using those exact terms. But they really depend on what the pain points are and how much of value those pain points are.
You're kind of a segue into my next half of the presentation, and there are some things technically we can do. The radio buttons, like the Microsoft, if you select them all off, if you do get them all off, you're good. If you miss one radio button, that one button shares with all the others. And so, but again, this is really coming down to privacy laws. I think we need a GDPR here in North America as well. That's what it's going to come down to, where you put the consumer in charge of their data. And if you're going to operate in a certain country, you got to follow a GDPR, which means you can't deny a person a product if they want to control their own data. One thing I didn't talk about, and I should have, is that Apple changed their how their operating system shares data, and you saw that Facebook's revenue dropped like $21 billion because Apple started putting the consumer more in charge of what they're sharing with third-party apps. And I think Apple did that on their own based on consumer feedback. But going back to the people in this call, it's like most consumers don't care.
I think, Kevin, on that side of it, like if I'm remembering correctly from the Social Dilemma, I have to go back and rewatch it again. but in terms, I mean, Ray was saying, what can people do? And the guys who came up with this initially I think in the end going, it has to essentially be a consolidated effort by everyone. You have to disconnect. There has to be a reason for them not to do it, and that becomes difficult. So unless there's an enforcement policy like you brought up to begin with, in other words, unless it really gets policed and it's not just on a piece of paper, and yes, we've got this great piece of legislation that we're just never going to really enforce. It's there. It becomes something that it's I mean, that's why they called it the social dilemma, right? Because it affects everybody, and unless there's sort of like a mass protest like that, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, and I don't think the masses care.
No, it's a tough, and it's getting them to care. I don't know the gentleman talked. I'll call him A because he spoke on there, but those people have something that they care about, and they have a reason for caring, and that becomes an impetus for actually doing something about it. Great discussion, everyone. Thank you. We're at 3:17. Kevin, I think I'll hand the floor back over to you, and we can continue on.
All right, let's do it. So now we're going to talk about Facebook, and you can see that the information at Facebook, and this is a Facebook app on your phone, and you can look at the data they're gathering because it's sitting on your phone. You can see even the battery level, signal strength, all the stuff you wouldn't think Facebook would be interested in. What I think is that you got to watch windows in the foreground or the background, or even your mouse movements, or any movements with that you move back and forth. Your unique identifiers of your device, on and on, family device numbers, and then your Wi-Fi access points, your beacons, and the cell tower information, Bluetooth signals. All this information is Facebook is capturing. And then it goes on further, is that your GPS location, your camera, your photos, your contact list, stream a video from your phone to your TV, it's tracking all that, all your cookie data. And again, these are all the Facebook apps. So partners receive your data when you visit or use their services through third-party apps. Now, this is interesting because Facebook has cookies on a lot of websites that you're going to visit, and they collect your data when you visit those third-party websites. And so this is everywhere. Okay, so let's talk. This is Canada Post, click and ship, right? You're gonna do a shipping a label. So I'm using the browser DuckDuckGo for this, and you do this, boom, 8 trackers blocked. The first 2 are Google and Facebook, and there's Adobe and Twitter. How many consumers do we think realize that when they do online shipping on Canada Post that they're giving their information to Facebook and Google?
I'd like to ask, why is a public service shelling out for a private company using our data as a transactional item? How is this even legal? Again, we get back to the policing side.
Yeah.
Well, I did some research. Canada Post is a Crown Corp. And as a Crown Corp, it's different than like visiting the Department of Health. It's a Crown Corp. And so as a Crown Corp, they have, the rules are not as stringent as when you hit a real government website. If you know it, it says canadapost.ca. It doesn't say canadapost.gov.ca.
I guess my main question is if my taxes pay for them or not. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Well, as much as they fund Canada Post, your taxes are paying for it. But the fact that Canada Post has this going on, I don't think people realize it. That they're tracking what you're shipping, where you're shipping it, and the weight of it, and any other information you put while you create this shipping label. And this is what Facebook was saying. It says we track what you, over here, this statement I hadn't read, partners receive your data when you visit other services. Well, okay, I don't think Canada Post people realize that this is one of them. And then I want to alert people here.
So what would happen if if the local newspapers had a full front page article about how Canada Post is reselling our data for money, what would we assume would be the political fallout of that? Because I'm asking because if no one is going to police it, then we've got to stir the pot. We've got to make people angry and make the move ourselves, kind of thing. So I just thought I'd ask for your opinion on that.
Well, my opinion is you would get a public affairs statement from Canada Post saying that, yes, we do this to keep our costs down. If we didn't do this, we would have to raise the price of posting. I'm sure that's what they would say, or something along that lines.
Yeah. Something we are not able to argue against, and we were never asked our opinion of. We're doing this for your security on your behalf, etc. We've seen that before. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So third-party cookies, what are they? Okay, here's Costco, Costco.ca. So I changed my password, boom, and a Facebook container popped up. Allow Facebook to track you on Costco.ca? Really? No, I don't want that. So again, this is DuckDuckGo. 10 trackers they're blocking. Well, which ones are they? The usual suspects. I didn't expect Microsoft there, but okay. But Google, Adobe, Facebook, and Twitter, there they are on Costco.ca. Now, had I used another browser other than DuckDuckGo, that would have been captured by all of these tracking my behavior. I just think that's interesting. Okay, this is something interesting. I ordered a box of Alaskan salmon. Okay, I ordered that. And the next day, I get from their competitor for more salmon. Well, I just ordered a box. I don't really need another box. But I thought this was interesting. So I went back to this website and found out that U.S. Wild Seafood has a tracker on their website. And I'm sure that's without their knowledge. So in other words, this company is spying on this company's transactions. And as quick as it picks up a new customer, it's sending me an ad. And there's nothing illegal about that.
I wonder if they're doing it the opposite way too. Order from USA Wild Seafood and see if you get the other one coming back.
You know, and the only reason I paid attention to it is because I was putting this presentation together, and I'm full alert, right? And I said, hey, wait a minute, this is odd. I've never heard of this company. And it was the very next day that I got this. Well, no, see, 2 days. So this is the 11th, and this is the 2 days later. I think that's fascinating. So the ad wars. So what do they do with your information? People, places, things you're connected to and interested on and off our products. Off our products. Wow, that's interesting. Talked about using Messenger, Instagram. Well, Messenger has nothing to do with Facebook. Where you live, places you like to go. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, we use face recognition to recognize your photos, videos, cameras, blah, 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 your face in pictures at other people's phones. This is all from their end user licensing agreements. We also process information about you across other Facebook companies, like all here. So they share. Okay, and this is a pretty good article about how social media networks facilitate identity theft and fraud, because this is all they're capturing. And if your digital identity can be replicated, then you lose. Okay, so let's talk about Snapchat. We may store information about you use of third-party apps and websites on your device to improve our content. Yeah, I'm sure it's improving your content. Okay, and then there's all this information. Your device, they really want your phone book. They want your camera and your photos. Information about your hardware, software, tools, blah, blah, blah. Here you go, device sensors such as accelerometer, gyroscope, compasses, microphone. Really, this is a photo app. Why do they want my gyroscopes and accelerometers? So, and I'm sure the average consumer has no idea what an accelerometer is, much less that Snapchat is tracking it. Okay, questions on this one? I just thought that was a funny ad.
With some of that, I wonder if it's like I know that often there's settings that are tied to other settings, like location is often tied to Bluetooth nowadays. So I wonder if they kind of have to put that because there's no technological way around it. I just don't know.
Well, the technology way around this is if you have a Facebook app, a Facebook account, get to it through a browser. Don't have any of these apps on your phone. Just go to the browser, because at least there's a gateway. In the browser, they can only get limited information. Although what they will do, they hound you about, boy, this would be a better experience if you had this on your phone. Like, I know I got the CBC Gem, and I don't have it on my phone. I go through the browser, but every time I open CBC Gem, they want me to download the browser, download the app. And I thought, you know, I don't know. Oh, by the way, CBC is also another Crown Corp. Okay, Apple. Apple's not as bad, but it's still scary. When you share your content with your family and friends, Apple collect information about you, the names, mailing addresses, emails, essentially your contact list. We may receive your personal information from others if that person shares a content with you using your phone. And then it goes here, your contact information, your hardware identifiers. Certain features will not be available once cookies are disabled. See, and this is what you said earlier about if you don't like it and you disable the cookie, you're not allowed to use the product. This is where I think legislation can help us. That no, the consumer should be in control and you should have access to the product even though you disable cookies. And referring and exit of websites. What? A new date timestamp, the clicking streams. If you prefer not to be tracked this way, you should not click text or graphic links in your emails. So in other words, if you don't like it, don't use it. And then they do have a face identity security, which I think is the only one I've seen. But here's what they do. An app developer can choose not to ask your permission. And that's consistent with their privacy policy. So let's read that again. An app developer can choose not to ask your permission. And that's consistent with their privacy policy. Wow. Okay, this is an iPhone. So your microphone, only have apps that actually need your microphone. Don't have your flashlight use your microphone. So make sure you got these radio buttons set right. Yeah, I got on Zoom because, yeah, I use Zoom. All right, and this is interesting. I went on a trip to Mexico and it scanned all my pictures in the cloud and says, do you want to share these photos with these people? And there are their pictures, and all I need to do is put their email addresses there, and I can share all these pictures. So if I do that, what have I just done? Without my friends or family's permission, I have identified their face with an email address without their permission and given that to Apple. Okay, this is how the Chinese government is tracking the Uyghurs. And this is an improper use. And the average user is not going to think anything about that. Well, sure, we all on the same vacation, and I'll put the email addresses to these faces, and then they'll get all these pictures. But Apple gets it all too. And now what you have done is you've identified all your friends. You just face recognized all your friends with an email address without their permission. Here's something I talked about earlier. This is my family. This is my daughter when she was like 16, and I called her Erin Von B. But I only call her that on text messaging. She's like 27 now, so and so what it's done, it's misidentified her. Instead of being Erin Murphy, it calls her Erin Von B because it's read my text messaging. But it's also correlated all the pictures of her over the years. She was like 16 here, and she's like 26 here. So that's interesting. They've done all that correlation. Here's also interesting. When you read the policy, you can opt out of face recognition, but it's only for your face. You can't opt out for anyone else. And if the person doesn't have an iPhone, there's no opportunity for them to opt out. So they're going to scan people that they do not have a relationship with. If you have an Android phone, but you show up in my picture on my Apple phone, I can only opt out my face. I cannot opt out anyone else's. And these people may not have iPhones. Therefore, there's no relationship with Apple, but Apple's going to scan them and identify them. Yeah. And our privacy laws don't address face recognition at all. the consumer is not protected.
So if I could just make another comment, the concept of us having pictures of ourselves is kind of pointless, right? I mean, that's an ego-based thing. There is absolutely no reason to have a picture associated with an email address unless you're going on multiple blind dates every night. It just seems like if we're separating what's necessary from what is satisfying, that we are ourselves guilty of feeding the beast, as it were, due to our own desires in that way.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. And there's no reason to do it, but they play on human emotion. That's why we make things. And any other questions about this before I move on to the last segment? Okay, last segment. Digital marketing is after your information. Your phone apps can be spyware targeting your contact list, phone to microphone, and your location. And consider accessing Facebook and search only through their websites. Don't install a search app on your phone. It's just spyware. Contacts. Do not allow anybody to go after your contact list. You know, your friends will thank you by not sharing your contact list information that includes them so they can be spammed. Don't do that. So defend your contact list. Here's something interesting here. This is Strava, which I use for my workout apps. And friends, you are friends on Facebook. So Strava and Facebook are going through my commonality and friends and identifying people that are not on Strava, but they're on Facebook. And so you're friends on Facebook. You want to follow Strava. And so this is when I deleted the Facebook app off my phone, because I have the Strava app and I had the Facebook app, and they were sharing information without my knowledge. Once I deleted the Facebook app off my phone, I never see this ever again. So Facebook only through the browser, and the Strava app you have to have as an app because it tracks your performance. And by the way, grouse grind for an hour and a half is a very bad time. I wish I had one of my faster times.
I forgive you, Kevin.
Okay. This is a trip planner. This is a bus app in the Seattle area. Well, they would like access to my contact list. Why? This is me getting on a bus, not anyone else. So don't allow. Okay, and then your opt out to all the above policies, and this we talked about earlier, generally denies you access. See, it tells you you need to allow these cookies to use our service. So this is where legislation can help, is that, no, I should be controlling my data. But what these companies will tell you is, well, since the product is free, we get to control. Okay, because legislation currently allows them to do that. And you can use it in private and there's strict cookies, but you may be denied contact. Your online account names are usually your email address. And I think this is true for most of us, that we use our email address as our account name everywhere. And when you do that, now the attacker, all he needs is the password. And then they can password spray all your accounts using that email address that's common, and eventually they'll break in. That's why it's really important not to have the same password used more than once anywhere on the internet.
May I add one point to
Sure.
what you've been sharing? So when you set all these settings, let's talk about the Apple platform briefly, is that you want to ensure that you enable the password. When you do go into the Apple platform and you do set up all the settings, which are very good, what you've recommended, but you want to ensure you set a password there. The reason is because every time they do an update, if you don't have that password locking it, it'll reset it. The same thing applies to Google or any other platform. You want to ensure that, unfortunately, they don't allow you to lock in those settings. So every time there's a platform update, whether it be on Facebook or any other social media platform, you may have to revisit them every so often to ensure that settings that you have set on those platforms from a privacy perspective are still the way that you want them to be, because they will reset them.
And that is a very good point that I had overlooked, but you're right. And a lot of us have automatic updates set, so it just happens in the background. So we don't know when our privacy settings have been reset to the default. because we're not paying attention. And again, the average consumer doesn't know that. And your contact list is now out. And what I said here is make sure your banking passwords are treated special. Make sure you use a passphrase or a password manager, and certainly not the same as your social media. What I would suggest is that rather than use your email address for your social media, set up a dummy email address account for your social media that you only use for social media, because that makes it harder for these tracking cookies and all the websites you visit from correlating your data to your using your email address. Just have your social media be a separate email address. It's not correlated to anything else you really do. And that way you're going to Facebook, it won't correlate in the background. Okay, password spraying. This is something we did when I worked in the city of Seattle. This was a couple of years ago. And some passwords I thought I would find. And I found enough of these that were disturbing. And so don't pick a password that's easily identifiable. And also put a space bar in there somewhere. Space bars are really good for breaking up common words that people don't understand, but don't use something that's easily predictable. Okay, good news is your data is protected by company privacy policies. That's good. Right up until the breach. Of course, when you're breached, it nullifies everything. Now your data is out there. So what can you do? Yeah, question.
Oh yeah, so one thing that, one technique I've been sharing with some of my clients as far as passwords is one of the best characters you use in a password is the comma. And the reason why that is because a lot of these password breaches, they get sent out and people collect these breaches. What they do is they pump them into a CSV type file. The comma is phenomenal because what it'll do is it'll end up creating columns that are passwords are broken up into pieces. And then what that happens is it makes it much more difficult for the attacker to then correlate those passwords into brute force attacks or that sort of thing. It's just an extra, what they'll do is, and I've spoken to some criminals and attackers, and what they do is they find, you know what, if it's too much work, I'm just gonna move on to the next person. So a comma is actually a very interesting character to insert into passwords.
Boy, that is a great tip. I'm going to add that to the presentation because you're right. Until you said that, I did not think of that, but it does. It breaks it down to another column.
So if we're talking about strategies, another strategy would be to not actually put in a proper password, just mash the keyboard with 300 characters, turn on two-factor authentication, and then every time you log in, you just renew your password.
Yeah, there's probably some limits to a lot of these websites you hit. They only allow how big a password, how many characters they allow.
Yeah, but the idea being that you can just mash the keyboard. You don't actually have to remember the password if you've got two-factor on and you trust it.
That's true.
What it is.
That's true.
What you don't want to do is introduce friction. Anytime you introduce friction to when you're dealing with a consumer, the more friction, the more roadblocks, the more things that you're trying to get them to do, the less likely they're going to follow it. So it's really important that we make this as frictionless as possible. A lot of the clients that I deal with and anybody I speak to in regards to whether it be, and we're talking about generally non-technical folk, which is a lot of different people, whether you're talking about people in their 90s or you talk about teenagers, we want to introduce something that is extremely frictionless. And then if we're trying to ask them to reset their password every time they use it, that's friction. And then they're not going to comply. The other thing I would like to suggest, there's a lot of really great tools as if we were trying to create anonymity and variability in our usernames and passwords. One tool that we can use are things like simplelogon.io, which is a great tool. 33mail, and what they allow you to do is create unique password or unique email addresses on the fly, so that we can, as a really good tip is having a unique email address for more and more of your websites. Some of the clients I have, they have unique for every single website, but then their tax threshold is a bit different. But what we want to do is make this as frictionless as possible, as easy to implement as possible. And therefore, we need to make sure that what we're telling our clients or what we're instructing our family and friends is that it's going to be as easy as possible so that they can implement it and it's not painful, because the more painful, they're not going to follow through and they're just going to do the easiest thing.
Yeah, very good point. I really like to tell you about the comma. That one's I'm going to add to the deck for sure. Okay, so social media. Don't have a social media app on your phone. Just don't do it. Access it through the browser, because they're going to spy on everything else you do. Don't have a search engine on your phone, even though they'll harangue you to death to download their app. Get Bing or Google through the browser, and that way you got that gateway. And they don't like that because they can't spy on whatever you're doing, but only get those to the browser. And don't allow phone access to your microphone, location, or contact apps. Now, if it's a location app like Apple Maps or Google Maps, yeah, you need to give them the location, otherwise it won't work. So I get that, but don't let things that don't need access to these four things have access to them. Just don't do it. And then use a separate email account for social media. Have different passwords for bank than you do social media for sure. And use a VPN, which of course virtual private network. I think that's critically important to use a VPN. And if you're going to go to a Starbucks and do work, make sure when you log into the Starbucks, you also turn on your VPN before you do anything. So you're not being spied upon by someone else that's in the Starbucks or it's attacked the network. You just don't know. Here's something interesting. This is my auto insurance company, United States. Of course, we have lots of them. Looking for my social security number. Why does my auto insurance need my social security number? They don't need it. It's none of their business, right? And so it's a required field. So I just make up a number. Just make it up so you can get past the field. They're not authorized to use it anyway. And I phoned them up and they said, well, use it for identification. I said, well, don't you have my driver's license number? Yes. Well, isn't that identification? You're our auto company. So, but I'm talking to a clerk, not a policymaker. So just make stuff up. And just because a form asks you for personal information does not mean you got to fill it in. And I think this is where a lot of people get caught up, including your kids, get caught up in Facebook and in Google, and you just put your life story in there and it's captured for good. And then we talked earlier about ad blocks. Don't log into your Microsoft or Google account when you're browsing. Just don't. Don't link your accounts. Be sure and clear your search history, clear your cookies. DuckDuckGo is both a browser and a search engine now. They've got both. And I would highly recommend using DuckDuckGo for your browsing and your search engine. And I think early on we talked about have a browser or have an ad blocker on. Use an ad blocker, use in private browsing, DuckDuckGo for search and browsing. Disable location for most of your applications. And please defend your contact list. Your friends will just be pleased if you do that. And the final slide is, what if you lose your phone? How bad is it? How strong was your unlocked password? You have max number of tries enabled? Do you have face recognition to log into your phone? Face recognition to log in your phone is really, really good. That's a frictionless way for the average consumer to dive into that. And be sure and find your phone. Like me, when it fell off my bike, I didn't know it. I had my son triangulate me, have me go back and pick it up. So do you trust the apps that you have installed? Are they tracking your online behavior? The answer is yes. Are they tracking your location and want your contact list? Yes. Are they listening to your conversations? If you have an Alexa in your home, it is listening to your conversation, doing keyword search and doing AI correlations for there. If you're storing photos in the cloud, they're probably face recognizing your photos and tracking your location, your activities, with whom you spend time with, says it right in user agreement, and they're also tracking the faces of people that are else in your photo. Okay, is your social media being used against you? And this is what I alluded to earlier, is that what I noticed is that based on my clicks, out of my news feed, my opposition viewpoint started to be filtering out. So I only got news that were tailored to my current beliefs. And I think this is the problem with the divide we have in our country right now is if this has happened to all of us, that based on our previous history, whether you're conservative or liberal or NDP or whatever it is, your news feeds is only sending you that information that aligns with your current level of thinking. You mistakenly believe that everyone else is seeing the same news. And again, we're not reading paper newspapers anymore. And so that's why you get the trucker protests in Ottawa and the borders all closed, because these people think that everyone is seeing the same thing. They couldn't imagine why someone would not be protesting. And on the other side, we're looking at it and so why are these clowns protesting? We're not seeing the same news. And so this is where your clicks and your social media is being used against you. And I think it's dividing the nation because we don't have the same news, and it creates extremism. All right, and my last slide. Thoughts or final comments from the other smart people in the room here?
So one additional thing is you've got some really great points about DuckDuckGo. Another phenomenal browser is Brave. But I would suggest that if you're going to be using any browser, regardless of what it is that you regularly check and delete your caches on any browser. Because even though, for example, DuckDuckGo or Brave suggests that when you close the app, that they delete your browsing history, if you actually go and review that manually, you'll actually see there's certain things that are still saved. So proactively going and clearing those caches, it will get rid of all your tracking cookies, will get rid of all your browser plugins, all the different things that get installed during your specific session. Even private browsing, I've found from the research I've done and the things that they don't always delete everything. So highly recommended clearing those caches manually.
And by clearing the cache, we're talking about your cookies and your temporary files. So clear them both. Absolutely true. Other thoughts, comments, or questions?
I had a couple more thoughts. And I don't mean to keep throwing them at you. I'm going to run out of thoughts by the end of the day, but it is Friday. The first thing I wanted to mention, just in terms of expanding on what you said earlier on, I use Fitbit as an example. I know lots of people who use Fitbit in the past, and I never used it, but they swore up and down about their privacy stuff, and that all their heartbeat rate and all this other stuff was private, and then Google went and bought the company.
That's right.
So it doesn't actually matter what the current EULA says. It doesn't matter what you believe in terms of the current guarantees, because tomorrow there could be a new owner and they have the right to trash that previous EULA, at least by the look of it, and do whatever they want. And you've already signed over all your data and are now a little bit concerned, and you have no control. So that was the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing was, you mentioned the thing about face recognition for your phone. It rubs up against a reticence of mine, which is, for example, I have a Proton Mail account and I pay for it. And I pay for it because I like to pay for things and not be used as a product, as you've said before. However, Gmail is constantly trying to ask me for my phone number so we can do some two-factor authentication. And I will not give them my phone number, not because I don't want two-factor authentication, but I absolutely do not trust Google with my phone number. So when we're using something like face recognition to get into an Android phone, I'm using it for a specific purpose. However, now that there's face recognition of myself on an Apple phone, now I'm giving all of that to Apple without any effort whatsoever. And now suddenly, when we've done all this other stuff about hiding people's identity and removing pictures from things, I've just given them everything right up front, just in order to access my stuff. So there's a couple of things.
That's a good point. What I need to do is I need to find out that using your face to open your phone, I have to find out how they're using that data. Let me do some research on that. But I was under the impression that the face recognition to open your phone stays on your phone. But what you made me realize is that's a really big assumption that could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. And they can change their mind later on anyway, right? Because they want to reconcile it with their other records just to be sure to give you a better service or something nonsense like that.
And let me also add that if you don't want to give your phone to Google, which I agree, use a password manager, or use a either Google Auth, which is secure, or Microsoft Auth,
Or
which is,
Authy,
or what's the last one?
Authy, AUTHY.
Put that in the chat because that's a new one for me.
Thanks.
Also, if you use password managers, they have the built-in one-time pads inside there to allow you, again, using the frictionless method of helping people use those tools. Authy is a phenomenal tool because it allows you then to synchronize across multiple platforms. It's outside the password manager, so if people are increased concerned about security. The Face ID, what it's supposed to be doing is converting your face into a digital imprint that's gets stored on your phone, that is supposed to stay on your phone. I would add that people should also consider looking at zero knowledge products, as Proton Mail is one of them. And what you can do is something called MySudo, which is a great tool. It allows you to create email addresses and phone numbers that you can then use on places like Facebook and Twitter and those sort of things as your two-factor. And what's great about MySudo is they're considered zero knowledge, which means they don't store your communications for more than, I think, an hour or two, and after which that is wiped. So if they were issued a subpoena by a court or whatever, they could not get your history. So when we're looking at tools from a privacy perspective, we want to look at things that are zero knowledge that have been third-party audited. For example, Proton Mail every year goes through a third-party audit to ensure that whatever they state in their EULA and their privacy and security policies actually pertain to real life. So we want to pay attention to those sort of things as well. These are really critical when we're thinking about those. There's a lot of phenomenal tools, whether it be MySudo, if you're going to be using Wire, which is a great tool for communication. It's a lot because it's just using email as your identifier. Again, as I mentioned earlier, 33Mail is a great tool for using privacy when you want to create email on the fly, and my entire family uses it. I encourage my clients to use different versions of this, and simplemail.io is a great tool, allows you to create email addresses on the fly, gets forwarded to you. What's great about something like simplemail.io is you can actually respond back to the person using that fake email address, going to, say, your Proton Mail, and you use your Proton Mail as your repository to collect all your emails, and then you respond back right to through simplemail.io. The other person on the other end thinks that they're replying to or you're communicating with them, and they would never know what your Proton Mail email address is. So these are really great tools that we can use as relays to be able to keep our privacy level at an extreme measure, and then also be able to participate in the greater world as far as increasing our privacy and our security at the same time.
Well, thank you for that. Hey, I've been going through the chat window since I haven't seen him earlier. So Sean Byrne had a question about UBC students, Constantine Besnos. Yeah, that's him. That's the one that
Excellent.
He's the guy. And
I'll check him out.
Yep, you found him. So let's see what other questions I might have missed. Advertising, post all different email marketing. Let's have how two-factor auth. Okay. Any other question I didn't answer? I think Stan answered that one. Thank you.
I should note that I happen to play in the very extreme privacy range. So if anybody wants to know or learn more about some of the things that are kind of what most people don't talk about, or even beyond what we're speaking today, Ryan Liu knows who I am. So you can reach out through him, and then he can put you in touch with me.
And are you in BC?
I am.
Are you part of the draft legislation that Victoria is looking for the province for change of privacy laws? Are you part of that discussion?
No, but I am part of, I guess, the Privacy Security Advisory Council for British Columbia, but not that particular legislation.
Well, I would hope they'd be coming to you then. Maybe my hope. So, okay. Okay, any other questions? We couple of new messages here, and then otherwise, Stan, that's the end of my deck.
5 minutes left. The This has been fantastic. I've been monitoring the chat. It's been really active while you've been presenting at the same time. I think has been absolutely fantastic today, Kevin. I really appreciate you doing this, and for everybody that's contributed, thank you so much. It's been fantastic today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to have these interactive. Yeah,
Yeah.
really, because Stevie's and like the comma for the password, I'm going to add that to my deck for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Kevin,
thank you for that.
Kevin, it's Orvin Lau here. I don't know if you saw my comment I also put in the chat about the suggestion if your system supports it, you can use the space character as well. It's actually something that was mentioned by one of the keynote speakers at our RSA conference. And they said, actually, if you really wanted to be sneaky, you put the space characters at the end of your password. So even if it were printed out on an attacker screen, they won't actually notice that there's space characters necessarily at the end of it. So.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I actually put it took me a little while, but I actually found the link to the actual RSA conference. You can actually watch his actual comments on this if you want to, see those or hear those comments directly.
So a comma in the middle and a space bar at the end. There you go. Thank you for that.
One or two spaces, right? Or however many you want.
All right, Stan, back to you.
Terrific. Yeah, any other comments, any other questions for Kevin? No, seems pretty.
I was just looking at the Google Analytics comment there.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Just in the chat. I know the terms and conditions for Google Analytics, you're not supposed to be able to track people, but I know there's a hack way around it. So, I don't think it's tracking individuals officially, and I'm not sure how they would figure out that you are doing that if you have Google Analytics set up. Yeah, just, I don't know. I tend to encounter it once in a while and set it up for different customers sometimes.
Well, with that, maybe we'll close it off for the weekend. Kevin, again, thank you so much for taking the time and presenting and for all the knowledge and passing that all on. And for everybody that came, appreciate again, this is why we get together. This is why the group is the way that it is, for disseminating this type of knowledge and just moving that all forward. Thank you again to everybody. Take care, safe weekends, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Cheers.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.